Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. This summer, we are getting a big Hollywood movie about a team of superheroes that first got their start in comic books. Usually that means something from DC or Marvel, but this time it's neither. I'm talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, whose new animated movie, Mutant Mayhem, is being produced by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. The guys behind Preacher, The Boys, The Green Hornet, and your mom. Even if you're not an expert on the Ninja Turtles, you probably had some idea that they originated as a comic book. Maybe you even knew that it was an independent comic book.
Yeah, I knew that.
But did you know that Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo also owe a lot of their origin story to Marvel Comics? In fact, their entire backstory ties in directly with a major Marvel character, one that also has a high-profile project coming out really soon. So I'm going to break down the early inspiration for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and how their origin story relates to the Marvel Universe and how these heroes in a half shell could even show up in the MCU, maybe even sooner than you think. But first, let's go all the way back to the beginning. The Ninja Turtles first debuted in 1984 as a self-published black and white comic book by a young artist named Kevin Eastman and his friend Peter Laird. It was an instant hit for Eastman and Laird and their independent comic book publisher Mirage Studios. Just 3 years later, the first animated series for the Turtles was created by Playmates to help sell action figures that they'd bought the rights to. 3 years after that, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles already had 2 video games and a live-action film, the highest-grossing independent movie of all time at that point. Awesome! They also had the hearts and minds of an entire generation of kids, despite the comics having a darker, much more mature tone. Eventually, the Ninja Turtles franchise would spawn countless comics and crossovers, 4 more television series, 5 more films, including 2 produced by Michael Bay, and a comic strip, a few dozen video games, some rap songs, Halloween costumes, and toys after toys after toys after toys.
I like turtles.
In fact, the more lighthearted tone we associate with the Ninja Turtles came from the toy company Playmates, who wanted to make sure that parents would be okay with buying the action figures. They were also the ones who color-coded each Turtles uniform. Eastman and Laird initially intended for all 4 Turtles to wear red bandanas, and you couldn't even tell that because the comics were in black and white. That wasn't even an aesthetic choice, it was just cheaper for Eastman and Laird to produce. Eastman and Laird, who both hail from New England, cite a few inspirations for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Obviously, they were into Japanese martial arts culture. They originally intended to give the Turtles Japanese names, but when they couldn't think of any good ones, they kind of randomly went with Renaissance artists from an art book that Laird had lying around.
Yeah, well, I still think Michelangelo gives off more of a Botticelli vibe.
Interesting. So in fact, one of the main comic book inspirations that Eastman and Laird cite is Frank Miller's Ronin. No, not Faux Hawkeye Ronin. Frank Miller's Ronin was a comic book made for DC. They were also inspired by Cerebus, a Canadian comic that featured anthropomorphic animals, and The New Mutants, Marvel's X-Men spin-off about angsty teenage mutants that were not ninjas or turtles. Although, there is a giant bear in there at one point.
Teenage Mutant Demon Bear, Teenage Mutant Demon Bear. The bear's in the danger room. Bear power.
Well, alright, technically the Demon Bear isn't one of the New Mutants, but that's a catchy tune, Doug. Anyways, besides the New Mutants, there's another Marvel comic that's an even more direct inspiration for the tone and world building of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that is the man without fear himself, Daredevil.
No. The blind lawyer from Hell's Kitchen.
In fact, the Ninja Turtles and Daredevil even have the same origin story, as in, literally, the same origin story. The accident that gave Matt Murdock powers also gave the Turtles theirs just moments later.
Really? This isn't like a crackpot conspiracy theory about how, like, Ultron was gonna stop Thanos all along?
No, sir, and to prove it, let's go all the way back to the first issue.
Of Daredevil or a Ninja Turtles?
Either one, doesn't matter, because that's my whole point. They both tell the same story. Let's start with Daredevil. How does Matt Murdock get his powers, his heightened super senses?
He got them when he was a little boy after saving a blind man from getting hit by a truck.
Exactly. The truck misses the blind man, but a radioactive canister it was carrying flies off and hits Matt square in the face. The radioactive substance in the canister blinds Matt for life, but it also makes his other senses super powered. His heightened hearing is so good it even gives him a radar sense, similar to how bats use echolocation. His heightened touch gives him superhuman balance and strength, which, when combined with his training, make him really good at fighting and parkour. Parkour! He also gets superhuman taste and smell, which occasionally comes in handy.
Are those pork? No, they're shrimp. Oh, this guy's got pork.
Okay, so that's all Marvel canon. That's Daredevil's origin story in Earth 616. Now, the first issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1984 also shows what happened that fateful day in New York. According to that comic, the truck that almost hit the blind man was a TCRI truck. TCRI stands for Techno Cosmic Research Institute and is secretly run by aliens, which is why it was changed to TGRI in the more grounded live-action movies. The canister that falls off the TCRI truck is actually mutagen, also known as the ooze.
It rolls off the tongue.
song better, yeah.
Ooze. It's nice, right? It's ooze.
It blinds Matt, but also mutates his senses and gives him powers. Now, the Ninja Turtles comic never explicitly says that the young man who gets hit with the canister is Matt Murdock, or that it gave him powers. Remember, Eastman and Laird are a couple of small-time indie artists with no affiliation with Marvel, but it's definitely heavily implied. Actually, it's even a little unclear who Matt is in this version of the comic. That's because besides the guy who saves the blind man, there's also another boy at the track accident. He's carrying a bowl of 4 baby turtles he just got as pets.
Came upon a shattered glass jar and 4 baby turtles.
That was us.
He's knocked over when the blind man is pushed out of the way and drops the turtles into the gutter. When the canister falls off the TCRI truck, it breaks. The radioactive ooze then comes out and washes down the drain and into the sewers along with the turtles. After they land in the sewer, the ooze mutates them, making them stronger and smarter. The turtles become mutant turtles. Meanwhile, a kindly rat named Splinter comes across the turtles. Splinter was the pet rat of a ninja named Hamato Yoshi, who was murdered by another ninja named Orokusaki. Splinter had learned ninjutsu from his cage by watching Yoshi train. After Yoshi was murdered, Splinter fled to the sewers, where he came across the turtles in the ooze. He scooped them up in a can to help them, and in the process became covered in the ooze himself and, like the turtles, was mutated. Splinter then raised the baby mutant turtles and trained them in ninjutsu, which is how they became the Ninja Mutant Turtles. And by the time of the comics, years had gone by, and they were now
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Bingo. So, as Matt was becoming Daredevil in his origin story above ground, the Ninja Turtles origin story was happening right underneath his feet in the sewers. Even if it's not explicitly canon, that is the secret Marvel origin for the Turtles.
Yeah, it's really cool how there are major pop culture properties that aren't even directly written or published by Marvel, but indirectly owe their existence to them anyways.
Right? Like how all the robot mechs in Japanese tokusatsu, like the Zords and Power Rangers, are all inspired from Spider-Man's giant spaceship mech in Marvel's Japanese Spider-Man adaptation from the 70s. That's a real thing. That's how much cultural weight Marvel has. It's really something special. But anyways, the Ninja Turtles mythology and world building quickly expanded and became its own thing. And it's pretty clear that the world the Ninja Turtles inhabit is not the same Earth 616 we know from Marvel Comics. Half the Ninja Turtles never get snapped away, and they're never sent along to Battle World along with Krang and Casey Jones. April O'Neil never reports on Steve Rogers being elected president. So while it's really cool to imagine the Ninja Turtles inhabiting the same New York City as Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Willie Lumpkin, it's hard to argue that that's actually the case. But the Turtles franchise definitely pays homage to Marvel, and especially Daredevil. There are multiple parallel characters that aren't exactly the same in both universes, but are strikingly similar. It's something that you can't unsee once you realize it. For example, after his accident, Matt was trained by an old blind man, a martial arts expert named Stick. What's a smaller version of a stick?
A splinter.
Exactly, high five. Stick trains Matt how to control his overpowered senses and master his radar sense, as well as training him in hand-to-hand combat, just like Splinter does for the Turtles. Just as Splinter's master was part of an ancient order of ninjas, Stick was part of a group called the Chaste and trained under the Ancient One. The Chaste are rivals of another ancient clan of ninjas called the Hand. The Hand were created by Frank Miller during his Daredevil run in the early 80s, and they have appeared in other Marvel comics since. Characters like Elektra, Echo, Wolverine, Sabretooth, the Mandarin, and even the Kingpin and Frank Castle have all been associated with the Hand. The Ninja Turtles also face off with a clan of evil ninjas who are not called the Hand. Instead, they're called the Foot, in another jokey homage name like Stick is to Splinter.
Look, person, if you're just gonna keep saying stick over and over, you better darn well throw a stick at some point. It's triggering to hear that word, and if you're not gonna play fetch, it's just not fair.
Stop trying to make fetch happen, Doug. So the Foot are a big part of the Turtles' mythology, and one of their biggest enemies. In the movie, they're made up of young New York street urchins like Sam Rockwell.
Regular or mental?
In the cartoon, they're robots. This was so the Turtles could beat them up every episode without parents complaining that the show was too violent. It's also why a lot of cartoons used flashy lasers instead of realistic guns. In most versions of the story, the Foot Clan is led by an evil ninja named Orokusaki, the man who killed Splinter's master. Orokusaki eventually becomes the main arch-nemesis of the Ninja Turtles, Shredder.
The Shredder?
Maybe all that hardware's for making coleslaw.
Just as Stick and the Hand are rivals in Marvel, so are Splinter and the Foot. Shredder actually dies in the very first issue of the Ninja Turtles comics. But the character proved to be so popular that he came back with a vengeance, just like Boyd Crowder in the Justified pilot. Shredder eventually became a pop culture icon thanks in part to his famous pointy armor.
But I'll bet I never asked to look for a can opener.
Some incarnations of the character seem to take a lot of inspiration from another Marvel character associated with the Hand, the Silver Samurai. The Silver Samurai debuted in Daredevil and eventually became more associated with Wolverine. Here's the Silver Samurai in 2013's The Wolverine. And here's a mutated Super Shredder in 1992's The Secret of the Ooze. Now look, it's not a one-to-one, but you can see the similarities are striking, especially if you compare Silver Samurai to the Michael Bay Shredder.
You think you're the owner?
There's also a few other specific parallels between Daredevil and the Ninja Turtles, like their close relationship to a local reporter. Matt befriends Daily Bugle journalist Ben Urich, and the Turtles, of course, bond with April O'Neil. Both have been portrayed in various ways across various media, sometimes with over-the-top sex appeal with actors like Megan Fox and Joe Pantoliano.
Go get him, Matt.
Some versions, most famously the 1987 cartoon, portrayed April as a redhead. Now this could be a reference to popular Daredevil character Typhoid Mary.
Or it could also be a total coincidence because red hair is pretty common. Not everything has to be a thing, person.
What'd you say?
I said great connection, person. Very incisive.
Oh, thanks. Speaking of red, Raphael famously used a pair of sai, the traditional Okinawan weapon with 3 blades. This is possibly inspired by Elektra, who also usually wears red and prefers sai as her weapon of choice, even after Bullseye killed her with one. That's commitment to the bit. Besides specific parallels between Ninja Turtles and Daredevil, they both share a similar overall aesthetic, especially the original Turtles comics. Daredevil is one of the most famous of Marvel's street-level heroes. He's typically not fighting the Kree in space, or Dormammu in the Dark Dimension, or over-the-top supervillains like Magneto and Dr. Doom. Typically, he's focused on street-level crime in his local neighborhood. Mobsters, hitmen, drug dealers. The Turtles, who do face off against mutants and aliens pretty often, still have the same street-level, gritty New York vibe to their stories, and they also fought local thugs and drug dealers.
I'm not chicken, you're a turkey.
He's right, drug dealers are dorks. Don't even talk to them. Cowabunga!
A lot of the more well-known characters from the franchise inhabit this grimy street-level tone, like the Rat King and Casey Jones. Casey Jones, who's a little psychotic, wears a hockey mask and beats up bad guys with athletic gear, and he doesn't have a one-to-one parallel in Marvel, but he would fit right in with the Defenders.
Or fit right in with the Mighty Ducks.
Because he plays hockey?
No, because he's a quack.
Quack, 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 quack.
Now who's a nutcase?
You are!
Actually, even though they don't have literally much in common, Casey is probably inspired by the Punisher, who has an uneasy pseudo-friendship to Daredevil. So, while the Ninja Turtles and Daredevil do inhabit different universes, their street-level worlds are extremely similar, and it's not hard to see the characters coexisting together. And that's what makes a Turtles crossover with the MCU such an exciting prospect, and one that probably wouldn't be too tough to pull off. I mean, these days it seems like anybody can cross over with the MCU.
But Disney does not own the rights to the Ninja Turtles.
True, but there's 2 reasons why that might not be a problem. Disney could collaborate with Nickelodeon and work out some sort of temporary shared rights deal like they did with Sony and Spider-Man.
You're an Avenger now.
Or we can just wait a few years for Disney to buy Nickelodeon along with everything else in the world.
Because at B&L, space is the final frontier.
So let's say that rights aren't an issue and the Turtles can't appear in the MCU. It would still have to make sense as a good story. Fortunately, there's a few ways they could be worked into Marvel's timeline. An easy way would be for them to guest star on an episode of What If. It's kind of perfect if you think about it. I mean, that show is mostly an anthology of fun, one-off premises, and it would keep the Turtles in an animated appearance, which is usually how they're portrayed. And it's not like the Ninja Turtles are strangers to one-off crossovers like this. They've met the Power Rangers, made a whole movie with Batman, and even crossed over with Archie.
Stay out of Riverdale.
The Ninja Turtles even appeared in the Injustice franchise, so the idea of them mixing it up with several heroes from a major comic book universe isn't even a new idea. The beauty of a one-off What If episode is that the Turtles could team up with literally anyone from the MCU. It would be awesome to see them mix it up with another fun side of Marvel like the Guardians of the Galaxy, or you could play off them working with someone more serious like Doctor Strange.
I'm Peter, by the way.
Doctor Strange.
Oh, you're using your made-up names. I'm Spider-Man then.
Besides What If, there's another way the Turtles could be brought into the mainstream MCU, and his name rhymes with Krang.
In Dimension X, I am absolute master.
That's right, Kang, the Conqueror. The MCU is in the middle of a multi-year story called the Multiverse Saga. Several movies and TV shows are about different timelines and even other franchises interacting with the mainstream MCU. So the Turtles could also find themselves trying to stop an incursion into their own world, or even teaming up with the Avengers to fight Kang in Secret Wars. So you don't have to stretch your imagination too far to see this happening. But there's one even more likely way to bring the Turtles into the MCU. That is kind of obvious when you think about it. After Marvel's Multiverse Saga ends with Secret Wars, we'll get to the next big story in the MCU, the Mutant Saga. I mean, mutant, right there in the name.
You have the same first name.
The Mutant Saga refers to the mutants from the comics finally joining the MCU, and will probably have a lot of focus on the most famous Marvel mutants, the X-Men. Now, the mutants in Marvel are naturally born due to a special X gene, not created from radioactive ooze. But, like we already established, Wolverine's enemies, like the Hand and the Silver Samurai, are basically the Foot Clan and Shredder. So this is where the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles can enter the story, teaming up with Wolverine and by extension with the X-Men, a crossover of perhaps the two most famous teams of mutants in all of comics. The Foot can even show up as an offshoot of the Hand. You can even set up the Foot Clan way ahead of time in Daredevil. They could do this in Season 2 of Daredevil Born Again, or even in a post-credits tease at the end of Season 1. Daredevil, after all, is the inspiration for the Ninja Turtles, so their MCU debut should really start with him. Maybe Orokusaki could show up first, as an old ally of Wolverine who breaks off from the Hand just as the Mutant Saga begins to unfold. He creates the Foot and takes on Wolverine's blades as inspiration for his new Shredder persona. Maybe we even see the MCU version of Stick with a pet rat that his students jokingly call Splinter. We could even see other teases in Born Again. Ben Urich can meet the new red-headed intern at the Daily Bugle, April O'Neil, who seems to always be getting herself into trouble. She could stumble on a secret government plan called the Sentinel Program. Maybe we can even get a flashback of Matt's accident, which then pans down to the sewers where some innocent pet turtles find themselves covered in rocks-on ooze. This can all set up an epic appearance of live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the MCU, where they team up with Daredevil, Wolverine, and the X-Men, maybe even siding with the mutants in a war against the Avengers. There are so many fun ways that Marvel could tie its own universe back to the Ninja Turtles, paying homage to their lasting impact on pop culture, bringing it full circle from when Eastman and Laird paid tribute to the devil from Hell's Kitchen. And it'll all be worth it, just once, if we can hear Charlie Cox use his gravelly Daredevil voice to say, "Cowabunga."
Cowabunga.
And remember, kids, drug dealers are dorks. Don't even talk to them.
Well, what do you guys think? Are we ever going to see TMNT crossover in the MCU? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. Smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.